Imagine a crisp April morning in rural Massachusetts. The air is still, but beneath the surface, a powder keg of tension is about to ignite. A decade of simmering resentment, oppressive British policies, and a growing thirst for liberty are about to erupt into open conflict. This is the story of the battles of Lexington and Concord, the moment when words turned to bullets, loyalties were shattered, and a single shot heard round the world truly began the American Revolution. How did a small skirmish in a quiet village become the spark that set a continent ablaze? Let's find out. By the mid-1770s, the relationship between Great Britain and its American colonies was at a breaking point. Years of increasing British control, through acts like the Stamp Act, the Townshend Acts, and the Punitive Intolerary Acts following the Boston Tea Party, had fueled a fierce spirit of resistance in the colonies. Boston, in particular, was a hotbed of revolutionary sentiment, occupied by British troops under General Thomas Gage. The colonists, especially in Massachusetts, began organizing. Secret militias, known as Minutemen for their ability to be ready at a moment's notice, drilled openly. They stockpiled weapons and gunpowder in towns like Concord, anticipating the inevitable confrontation. Both sides knew a clash was coming. It was only a matter of when and where. Gage's mission was to disarm the rebellion before it truly began, but his actions would only accelerate it. On the night of April 18, 1775, General Gage put his plan into motion. His intelligence suggested that the Provincial Congress, a revolutionary government, was meeting in Concord and that a significant cache of arms was stored there. His orders: march a column of roughly 700 British regulars, known as Redcoats, to Concord, seize the weapons, and arrest prominent rebel leaders Samuel Adams and John Hancock, who were believed to be in Lexington. But the colonists had their own intelligence network. Patriots like Dr. Joseph Warren discovered the British intentions. The famous signal, 1 if by land, 2 if by sea, was lit in the Old North Church steeple, indicating the British would cross the Charles River by boat. Paul Revere and William Dawes immediately set off on their legendary rides, spreading the alarm through the countryside, warning every town and farm along the way that the regulars are coming out. This network ensured that by the time the British arrived, they wouldn't find a sleeping populace, but a roused and ready resistance. As dawn broke on April 19th, the advance guard of the British column, under Major John Pitcairn, reached Lexington. Waiting for them on the village green was a small company of Lexington Minutemen, perhaps 77 strong, led by Captain John Parker. Their orders were ambiguous, not to provoke a fight, but certainly not to retreat without a show of defiance. Parker famously told his men, "Stand your ground, don't fire unless fired upon, but if they mean to have a war, let it begin here." The heavily armed British regulars, tired from their overnight march, marched onto the green. Pitcairn ordered the militia to disperse. Amidst the tense standoff, a single shot rang out. To this day, no one knows who fired that first fateful shot. It might have been accidental or deliberate, but it unleashed chaos. The British opened fire, a volley followed by uncoordinated shooting. The Minutemen, heavily outnumbered and outgunned, quickly dispersed. 8 Minutemen lay dead, and 10 others were wounded. Only 1 British soldier was wounded. The first blood of the American Revolution had been spilled. The British reformed their ranks and continued their march to Concord. After Lexington, the main British force arrived in Concord. They found that much of the weaponry and supplies had already been moved or hidden by the alert colonists. The British managed to destroy some gun carriages, burn a few wooden cannon barrels, and spill some flour, but the major cache of arms they sought was gone. Meanwhile, hundreds of Minutemen and militia from surrounding towns had gathered on a ridge overlooking Concord, observing the British actions. They saw smoke rising from the town, likely from the burning gun carriages, and feared the British were burning Concord itself. Galvanized, they decided to advance. They marched towards the North Bridge, where a detachment of British regulars was guarding the crossing. As the militia advanced, the British fired, killing 2 American militiamen. This time, however, the Americans did not disperse. Major John Buttrick, leading the American forces, gave the order, "Fire, fellow soldiers, for God's sake, fire." The Minutemen returned fire, unleashing a devastating volley that killed several British soldiers and wounded others. The British, surprised by the spirited resistance, broke ranks and retreated back towards the main force in Concord. This was the moment the shot heard round the world truly echoed. The colonial militia had not only stood their ground, but had forced regular British troops to retreat. Having failed to find the bulk of the arms and now facing determined resistance, the British commander, Lieutenant Colonel Francis Smith, decided to return to Boston. What began as an orderly march soon devolved into a desperate fighting retreat. As the British column moved along the 16-mile road back to Boston, they found themselves in a living nightmare. The alarm that Revere and Dawes had spread had summoned thousands of militiamen from every direction. They emerged from behind trees, stone walls, barns, and houses, firing relentlessly at the exposed British column. It was guerrilla warfare on a scale the British were unprepared for. The Minutemen, expert marksmen and intimately familiar with the terrain, used every bit of cover to their advantage. The British, exhausted, undersupplied, and harassed from all sides, were taking heavy casualties. Their morale plummeted. Their formations began to break. It wasn't until late afternoon near Lexington that a relief column of roughly 1,000 British soldiers, led by Lord Hugh Percy, arrived with artillery, saving the battered main force from complete annihilation. Percy's fresh troops provided crucial cover, preventing the complete rout of Smith's exhausted men. Under Lord Percy's protection, the British column finally limped back into Boston, having suffered significant losses: 73 killed, 174 wounded, and 26 missing. The American casualties were far fewer: 49 killed, 41 wounded, and 5 missing. The tactical victory belonged decisively to the Americans. The events of April 19th changed everything. What began as an attempt to seize arms had ignited a full-blown war. Thousands of colonial militiamen, energized by their success, immediately converged on Boston, effectively besieging the city where the British troops were now confined. This makeshift army, though initially disorganized, would soon be placed under the command of a Virginian planter named George Washington. The skirmishes at Lexington and Concord, though small in scale, had profound consequences. They demonstrated that the American colonists were not just willing to protest, they were willing to fight and die for their freedom. The battles of Lexington and Concord were more than just military engagements. They were the catalyst. They transformed a colonial dispute into a full-fledged revolution. The shot heard round the world was a declaration that the American colonists would no longer tolerate tyranny. It marked the moment when the abstract ideals of liberty and self-governance became a tangible, bloody struggle for independence. From those tense moments on Lexington Green and the brave stand at Concord's North Bridge, an independent nation began to emerge. The legacy of April 19, 1775, reminds us that even the smallest spark can ignite the most profound and world-changing movements. What do you think was the most surprising aspect of these battles? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the turning points of history.